everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 780 with a review of Wicked. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we're coming out to see one of the big things that came out this weekend. We're talking about Wicked. We're also going to have a review of Gladiator 2, so don't worry. I know that you're extremely concerned at the moment. We will have that. But here, we're talking about Wicked. Stephen Miller, what is your familiarity with, I mean, not necessarily Wicked specifically, but, you know, Wizard of Oz, any of the Oz adjacent things? Kind of like, where do you sit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I watched the original Wizard of Oz roughly a million times growing up. It's one of those movies I have trouble even thinking of as a movie that you, like, that was made at a time and that you watched it. It's just like a thing in the culture, you know? It is so ingrained in me. I played the Tin Man in my school production of The Wizard of Oz. Had to learn how to do a heel click, like a jumping heel click while wearing a trash can, which is pretty difficult while you're singing in a falsetto.
Nice.
Yeah, I know I watched, what is it called? Return to Oz? Whatever that, like, 80s semi-sequel was that was much more creepy and twisted and apparently more faithful to the source material. I remember being traumatized by it. It involves a woman who wears different heads. It is very unnerving.
Okay.
But I don't know a ton about the world of Oz. You know, I think I read, do you remember those great illustrated classics? Those, like, books when you were a kid that are, like, very abridged versions of books with pictures in them that you might watch?
For my so that I understand, were you attributing the word great to them?
No, Great Illustrated Classics was the name of the brand. They were like very small books that every other page was a picture, and it was like an abridged retelling of a more famous novel. And it makes me believe I have read a ton of things I've never read because I read a lot of those, including the original Baum book about the Wizard of Oz, which does have a little bit more about the witches of the East and West and North and South and whatever than the movie has.
Gotcha. I have not read these or looked at these books, and I don't even know the books you're talking about.
Okay, cool. But yeah, I know nothing about Wicked except for I've listened to the soundtrack on Spotify before to try to get into the groove, but I've found no musical has a soundtrack that works on me until I've actually seen the musical. Like, until I've seen it, it just doesn't even register. It's just noise for me. So I knew Defying Gravity, but otherwise totally unfamiliar with this particular source material.
Interesting. Did you feel that way about the Book of Mormon? Just curious if that's the one that breaks the mold.
That is a good question. That did break the mold. Okay. I listened to that way before I saw it, and it definitely left more of an impression. But still, I would say, like, the second half of songs in the Book of Mormon were not memorable to me until I watched the actual musical, and then I could remember it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've only ever consumed the Book of Mormon via the soundtrack. I'm like, for me, I'm like, yeah, it totally worked for me, and I haven't even seen the real thing, but maybe I'd feel differently if I saw the real thing. Yeah, but
the other exception is Waving Through a Window from Dear Evan Hansen worked on me before I had seen the cursed movie. But the other songs didn't, so it typically holds.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like we've talked, I feel like I have admitted this back when we reviewed Oz the Great and Powerful or whatever, that there's a James Franco Wizard of Oz movie, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
the Sam Raimi movie, which was terrible.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a fever dream that I had.
Yep.
But I don't think I've ever watched The Wizard of Oz all the way through.
Holy shit. After I went so long on how many millions of times we've all seen it.
I wanted the full effect of this statement when I said it. It's a thing that, like,
you saw the much more, the much more steamed version featuring non-problematic kings, James Franco and Zach Braff. So that's great.
I mean, that one was for the podcast, right? And back then I did decide to do my homework, and obviously this time I didn't decide to do my homework. But it's this thing where, like, I have absorbed so much Wizard of Oz just through the culture that I just never decided to sit down and watch it. Like, I've seen parts of it when it was on TV. I've seen parts of it probably over at people's houses. I've played music from it in school. It's just a thing where, like, I've just never really cared to go see it, which is why, like, for this, I was kind of like, oh yeah, Wicked, that's like a prequel or something. I like literally knew nothing about it other than it's a musical. I'd somehow absorbed Defying Gravity through the ether, but it was one of those things where I was waiting for somebody to say that line so I knew that it would be the song. Like, I couldn't have hummed Defying Gravity before seeing this film, and now it's the only thing I can hum.
We're actually having to do the opposite of an auto-tune to make our language not all be in the melody of Defying Gravity right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of a curse.
I mean, I won't lie. I just like, I walked home from that there, walked back to the hotel from watching Wicked, and I just went on TikTok and watched people singing Defying Gravity for like an hour.
I definitely tickled the ivories a little bit trying to get Defying Gravity out of my brain after watching this movie.
Nice. You're trying to put on a trash can just to get your body back into the shape to be able to sing that high.
Yeah, it's hard to hunch over a piano while you're wearing a trash can, though, so had to compromise in the end.
But yeah, anyways, I didn't know what I was getting into with this film, but I went in there just like in our omnibus episode. It was like, oh, Steven's seeing it, I guess I'll see it too.
Yeah, and for me, I was not, look, no offense to the musical or musicals in general. Again, I've alluded to the fact that even musicals I think are not good, like Dear Evan Hansen. The soundtrack I love, I find myself very taken with musicals when I actually sit down to watch them, but I had no desire to put myself through Wicked because I knew it was a part one of a 2-part story, and that just felt exhausting, and frankly the trailers did not do anything for me at all. So when I learned that critics were generally positive about Wicked, I honestly felt like it was a burden of, damn it, I have to watch this for the podcast now, and I heaped that burden onto Christopher. So we'll find out if he's happy or sad that I made him do it in the end.
We'll figure out whether or not Steven was Wicked. All right, so ready to get into this, Steven?
I'm ready.
I love when I can get a spit take out of you, even though you're just upset that I even did something that was... You
got a spit take, and I refused to make a noise for the podcast because I didn't want to give you the satisfaction.
All right. We're going to take a listen to the trailer for Wicked, and then we're going to come back and give you all a review.
Are people born wicked? Or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? You're green.
I am. Welcome, new students, to Shiz University. Miss Elphaba, you can room with Miss Glinda.
Oh, popular. I know about popular. Oh, I saved you some space, by the way.
Do you really think this is fair?
I do not. I was promised a private suite. But thanks for asking.
Please, everyone take your seats. In today's Oz, a real sorcerer who possesses true magic has become all too rare.
Absolutely remarkable.
That was you who made all that happen. How did you do it?
I don't know. I've never known. You. Come with me.
Of course.
Not you. You. You're the one the wizard has been waiting for.
Glinda?
Ew. I know. It's my granny's. I'd give it away, but I don't hate anyone that much.
Hey.
You should join us tonight. And don't tell me you have nothing to wear. Because you could wear this.
Something has changed within me.
She doesn't give a twig what anyone thinks.
Something is not the same.
Of course she does. She just pretends not to.
The wonderful Wizard of Oz summons you to the Emerald City. Come with me.
What?
To meet the wizard.
I couldn't possibly. This is your moment. I'm coming.
Something bad is happening in Oz.
The best way to bring folks together is to give them a real good enemy.
You have no real power.
That's why I need you.
Don't let her get away! This wicked witch.
Don't be afraid.
I'm not afraid. It's the wizard who should be afraid of me.
For anyone throughout this episode who feels like things are even more stilted than usual, or, you know, like there are sudden pauses or giggles or things like that, you should know that halfway through recording, a bunch of work started being done on Christopher's neighbor's place, and it means there are very, very, very loud noises that interrupt randomly. So we are trying our best to record despite the heavy distraction. So please bear with us.
So good luck to us all.
Yeah, and in hindsight, that was actually true for every episode you've ever not liked that we recorded.
All right, so that was the trailer for Wicked. It is a prequel of sorts for The Wizard of Oz, and it's a story of how the Wicked Witch became wicked. Stephen Miller, what did you think of Wicked?
Yeah, so there is a lot of good here that I am going to start with, because people are generally falling head over heels for this movie, and I understand why. Like, I think the two leads are awesome here. The Cynthia Erivo rules as the character of Elphaba. I don't have anything pulled up, so I'm just going to go with my gut on the names here.
Well, I'm not going to lie. When I read the character name, it was harder for me to pronounce it than just trying to duplicate what I was hearing in the
like, I want to say it's just alphabet without the T at the end, but it's spelled differently. Ariana Grande, I think, is hilarious in this movie. And as long as the two of them are singing, I think this movie is great. The choreography is awesome. The production design looks pretty immaculate. I think Jon M directs the hell out of it. There's a lot of like momentum to the dance sequences. The camera's gliding around. It really feels like a big cinematic event. Like, the money is definitely on screen for this movie. And it is one of those musicals where probably like 70% of it is singing and dancing. So by and large, it is totally successful. I rated this higher than 2.5 on Letterboxd. Like, I think this is a successful movie. I also think a lot of the things that I was averse to in the trailer, like there's this kind of glossy, fake bubblegum quality to it that made it look kind of cringy to me, make total sense in the context of the story, especially in who Glinda is and in what tone they're trying to strike with that character. It honestly made me feel a little bit stupid for not knowing that context. But yeah, in context, I think it is very funny. It works for the most part. I have two main problems with this movie. The first one is I just don't think the world of Oz, or at least the world of the MGM Wizard of Oz movie, which seems to be what this is cribbing from, is really all that rich for mining. Like, it doesn't feel like there are a lot of answers there. It doesn't feel like this is a world that I scratched the surface before and now I can dig in and really see this rich tapestry of characters. You know, like, people misuse a few words in this movie to signify that that's how they talk, you know. Occasionally they'll reference a Winky Prince or the Munchkins, but I don't really get the sense that there's a lot of there, or that there's a ton to dig into. There are talking animals also, and it feels like this should be a rich tapestry. I mean, the Wicked book came out in the mid-90s, it has been said that that was an inspiration for Harry Potter, among many other things, because it's like a university of wizards. And all of that should feel like, whoa, I am excited to dig into this world. And instead, I feel like if I scratch the surface, there's going to be nothing underneath it. So that was a kind of odd feeling for me. And then the second bit is that considering this is a 160-minute part one of a two-part story, it feels oddly thin on details and on weight. And I don't really know how to explain that, because I know they had tons of room to play here, but things just kind of happen in the story without me feeling like they were well motivated. I'll give one example that is early enough that it probably wouldn't be considered a spoiler. Toward the beginning of the movie, the character of Elphaba is going to school to drop off her sister, and they make it very clear she is not enrolled in this school. She's just here to make sure her sister is okay as she drops her off, unless I hit my head and missed some important thing that happened.
That was it. Yeah.
An event occurs that attracts a lot of attention, and suddenly she is enrolled in the school and staying in a dorm and writing to her dad about her experience of living at the school. And I understand what happened, but that should carry some weight, right? There should be a moment where this character is like, oh my gosh, I am an insider now. I am attending this school. My life is changing in a way I didn't expect it to happen. And instead, I feel like the film just yada yada so it can cut to a montage of her singing in the dorm room. And there are a lot of things like that where I feel like stuff is happening in the movie and they devote a lot of time to singing and dancing and doing kind of light character work, but there's no weight to it. There's a very important plot, important to the plot machinations about animals and the way the talking animals are treated in this world, that I feel like we get maybe 7 minutes of screen time devoted to. And just over and over, I just felt like there were things that should be more substantial that aren't. Anyway, there's just something about this movie where I feel like even though there's a lot of fun, the characterizations are pretty good, it just feels overly long without enough stuff going on to make me feel like I'm actually entering a rich, exciting world. Like I'm excited to know how they stick the landing here and tie this in with The Wizard of Oz, but I just felt kind of weird about the movie overall. How did you feel?
A lot of times when we watch films from properties that I haven't consumed previously, I get the sense that I'm missing stuff. And in the best cases, right, there might be enough there to bring me along where it's like, I feel like I don't get the whole thing, but I'm getting the gist and there's cool stuff here for me. But to the point you were just making, it feels like so much of this film happens because it's supposed to happen, not because it's actually happening. To talk about the good stuff, as you said, like the set design and the way they built everything, it's all amazing. And I really, really like the visuals and what I got out of this film. Some of the songs one song is great. 2 songs are halfway decent, and the other songs are snooze fests that I don't want to, anger a bunch of people who are huge fans of Wicked, but this film didn't necessarily bring me to Oz with the music itself, right? It was just kind of thing where I was waiting for Defying Gravity. I drank a Defying Gravity at Alamo, and I had to wait the whole movie for it. But anyways, there's enough interesting stuff there to pull me in, exciting things happening, but I was just so confused by the plot of the story. There is a scene where Glinda tricks Elphaba into wearing a witch's hat. And I couldn't for the life of me, looking at any other costume, understand why that hat was so hideous.
Right.
And it was just one of those things where it's oh, well, this is the story. She has to get a hat so that she can actually look the part. and people have to hate it, so they're going to sing a song about how they hate it, or do a big scene where everybody's talking about how, like, I can't believe she wore that hat, oh my god. And there was so much stuff that just happens that I don't understand. I mean, I understand by the end of the film why animals are being captured, but the film doesn't establish a world in which animals talk and how it's so important to have animals everywhere. But it is kind of funny that after we've spent so much time seeing animals disappear, that as soon as we're introduced to the Emerald City, there's just animals dancing and playing trumpet, and like, it's like a thing where like all the animals in the city are happy, which is very opposed to what the story is trying to communicate to me at the time.
It's like inconsistent world building, basically.
Yeah, and it's like there was a lot of weird stuff there that just left me very, very perplexed, but it still has a little bit of that entertainment value to it, right? Where I'm still watching. I don't give a lick about any character really other than Elphaba. Glinda is, she's a caricature of what I assume she is a caricature of. And like, it works conceptually, I guess, but it was grating on me the way she's supposed to be grating to the rest of the world. And I didn't feel like I was in on the joke. I was just a little bit grated by her. But I was just watching this film kind of wondering what it was about the story. I didn't realize that it was loosely based on a book before it became a musical. I just thought this was like a transposition of the musical into film. The one thing I will say is the part 2 or the part 1-ness of it didn't bother me at all. I actually think this is a pretty smart spot to cut the story. Like, it feels like a complete thought, even though it says to be continued huge at the end of it. It still felt
everyone, when they announced that they were splitting it in 2, they were annoyed, but they all knew it would end on defying gravity. Like there was no question that was what they were going to do.
Yeah. It just seems like a perfect spot. Obviously, it's the best song in the film. It has the most oomph behind it. Like, the other songs are very cutesy, and they're like, we are doing a song, we're doing a song, right? And this is like this freaking belted, operatic, like super awesome, dope song. And it's like, it ends there, and I'm like, if this happened 30 minutes before, it would have been a slog to get through the rest of the film, right? It was this thing where it's like, if you don't end on that note, it doesn't make sense to have the swell that big and then not end the film right there. So I was totally fine with that. But in general, I just was confused by the story. I wasn't too impressed by the music itself. To put things in context, Defying Gravity is an amazing song, but the thing that's stuck in my head that isn't Defying Gravity is the song from the end of the trailer of The End. like that is the thing that sticks in my head, is they played the trailer for The End before it, and that song that ends the trailer, a film that I've seen one time at TIFF, and then seen this trailer twice in theaters. And if I randomly start humming a song, it's that song for some reason, and I don't know why.
Interesting.
Probably because I
saw the trailer for The End before Wicked too, and I was thinking how mean it is that they're tricking all these theater kids into thinking that they're going to love The End.
That is true.
Yeah. Interesting. So it seems like you are more negative than I am, or at least on the music part. Like you mentioned that there's one great song, 2 somewhat decent songs, and the rest are kind of snooze fests. I would agree with that if I were treating this as like an album that I'm going to listen to in the shower, which I would and did. But for a movie musical, there is the type of musical where you have an earworm of a song, and there's the musical that's more like an Andrew Lloyd Webber thing, where it's like people are kind of operatically singing what they're doing. And for the operatic version, I still had tons of fun with most of the songs here. Like, they're not memorable at all, but I certainly wasn't like falling asleep for them. Like, I was entertained still watching it happen. I think one interesting thing is, one general consensus I've heard from people who know the musical when they learned they were splitting this in 2 is, oh man, part 1 is going to have the juice, but part 2 is going to be a slog, because part 1 has Defying Gravity. It's got the big musical numbers. They can see how it'll work. The end of it, they don't know how well that will play. And reading through the synopsis of the musical, I think I will feel the opposite. I think a lot of my problems with world building and what is this movie doing, I will feel more satisfied with what is going to happen in part 2. And I also think part 2 might be a little bit more radical in terms of how they use the storyline. Whereas part 1, Yeah, I don't know. There was just something kind of paper thin about it to me that it pulled me in just fine because of the, incredible set design and production value and everything that was on display. But it didn't quite do it for me. And, there's a review in the BBC by this guy, Nicholas Barber, that everyone has been ragging on all week because he talks about how this is overlong and didn't need to be split in 2 parts. And he says there are multiple subplots that could be cut without losing anything, including the younger sister character and the talking animals. And the internet is totally slagging on this guy, saying, like, is he media illiterate? Doesn't he realize why that's absolutely necessary to move the story along? Tell me you don't know there's a part 2 without telling me you don't know there's a part 2, blah, blah, blah. And before I watched the movie, I kind of was defending him, on Threads a little bit, just to be like, hey, this guy knows there's a part 2. He's talking about this as a movie. I think the criticism sounds reasonable. I haven't watched it yet. Having watched it, I kind of agree with him a little bit. Like, of course, literally you need the talking animal subplot to get to the end of this movie, though you could find a million other ways to get to the end of the movie if you wanted to. Technically speaking, you need the sister to explain why she went to the university. But, like, in terms of narrative momentum and weight, you either needed more of those stories or you should have chopped this in a way where they weren't required. Because especially the talking animal subplot, given how metaphorically important that is, this is a movie that we talked before recording, has at least 2 layers for bigotry and othering. This movie features a literal scapegoat, though they never use those words. It is very clear, like, why they want this metaphor. But considering how important it is, it just feels like we don't get a good sense of how talking animals exist in this world. We never are seeing characters who are othering them or are afraid of them or are blaming them for any problems. We don't actually see the thing that they are telling us is a big deal. Yeah. We're simply told it's a big deal, and then we have the wizard give a monologue to kind of underline why it's a big deal. And to me, that isn't enough. Like, I do think it feels out of place how little, and maybe part 2 will give it way more weight, but I think as a movie on its own, it is kind of a glaring flaw. So just to go on the record, I think it's a terrible review for other reasons, but I actually do kind of agree with that criticism.
Yeah, and I think that if you choose to split a story up, part of your job in adapting it is to find ways to split it up in a way that makes it make sense, right? Let's pretend that Wicked as a IP didn't already have a built-in audience who were going to see it no matter what. There is a reality in which you could attempt to make this and split it in half and not get funding to make the second half because of how poorly it does, right? As I said, Wicked has a built-in audience. There's no way this was not going to make money. No matter how good or bad it was going to bring in a bunch of money. So they knew what they were getting into. But in a world in which, like, shit gets canceled left and right, there is a world in which you could try to do something like this, and you have to make that first film feel like it stands on its own. Plot aside, this film does have an arc, like side plots aside. It does have an arc where, Elphaba's, like, path through this story does kind of make sense. I think
100%.
I'd say like 95%.
Yeah, it's her coming of age or realizing that being accepted by the crowd isn't necessarily the ultimate thing she wants to do.
All that stuff is 100%. But I mean, the turn of her realizing what's going on and suddenly becoming a thing that people would call Wicked feels like a huge leap to me, like across the board. Like, I'm like,
there's literally a huge leap.
She literally has to defy gravity.
Well, I'll go one step further, too. I think even if I only focus on her arc, and I think this is what you're getting at, if the arc that we're trying to crystallize is she has grown up being othered, all she wants deep down is to be accepted, and her, like, kind of cool veneer of not needing to be loved by other people is slowly breaking away as she meets a friend and realizes she can be good, and then her hopes are dashed. Spoilers, she becomes the Wicked Witch. I think we all know her hopes are going to be dashed. Even if you just had that, I should understand more about how long she has wanted to be accepted. I should know what the wizard means to her. I should know what her hopes and dreams are there. I should feel that getting crushed in real time, and I just don't. It's like another thing that just happens because they told me it happened, not because I'm actually led to see it in any meaningful way.
And also, like, in theory, on paper, this is her breaking bad, right? Mm-hmm. But really, this is her escaping, and then in part 2, she will break bad.
Well, you'll have to stay tuned. I think this is not really a prequel. It's like a revisionist prequel, right? This movie is trying to flip the character on her head. And so I think maybe Breaking Bad is less the right way to say it, and more this is how she became seen as in opposition to the people in power in Oz.
Gotcha. But in theory, in real true context, there's a world in which she is the hero, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like that is like everything we see in this first half is that the people who at the end of this film are yelling wicked should at the moment see her as a hero, but because of the nature of they wrote a song where everybody screams wicked, so you know she becomes the Wicked Witch. That there's just something missing there. That goes back to the previous comments about like how things are happening because that's the way they're designed. It's like this film is reverse engineered from songs that didn't exist until the musical. Which is like a weird way of doing it, right? It's not like, hey, here are story beats, turn them into songs. It's like, here are songs that sort of thematically are relevant to the story. Now reverse engineer the story from those songs. And it's just kind of a weird way to handle it.
Yeah, I guess light spoilers for where this is going. I think you will root for her the whole way through. Okay. And I think that's part of what the movie is doing. It is funny to see what has been influenced by Wicked. Like, I think Frozen is most obvious. I don't know. Did you watch Frozen?
I watched the first Frozen, but not Frozen 2.
Yeah. I think like the idea of the quote good and bad sister, and then like rooting for the bad one instead, and how they use their powers and how they're seen by the prince and other people in their life. I think there's a lot that people have cribbed from over the years. Is the Shrek stuff with Fiona or whatever the character's name, like being cursed to be green and then wishing to be her true self and then becoming green? Wow, great question. Shrek could also be, though the Shrek movie came out before the Wicked musical, and I don't know the book how much green was the signifier. I'm not sure of that.
Okay. So many people are so angry.
Yeah, we are not qualified to talk about this at all, by the way, but as two people who did not watch the musical or know anything about it, this is my experience. I don't know. I think as a musical, it works just fine. You know, I was tapping. I was having a good time. I ate my truffle Parmesan popcorn. I promised myself I would only eat half of it. I ate 2/3 of it. I felt terrible the rest of the day. I had a grand old time. But as a movie, I just have notes, and I'm finding all of the like rave reviews a little bit bewildering, because I think there's a lot of possibility that this could have been better, and for whatever reason they didn't tighten up the story or take advantage of the runtime to flesh out more things.
Yeah. And just for your sake, Stephen, I also ate truffle Parmesan popcorn, but I first had something healthy. I had a Shiz University chicken wrap.
Oh God. And did you see that? Have you seen the calorie count on that truffle parm popcorn? I made the mistake of looking when I ordered it this time.
At Alamo, I usually get plain popcorn, but I was in the mood for whiz.
Like 1,400.
I actually didn't check it there. Their bowls are shaped differently, so I think it's a different volume. Okay. I don't know.
Interesting.
They have smaller tables at the Boston Alamo.
I do. I know this is a sidebar, but I wish Alamo had smaller popcorn servings, because I feel like it's way too much for one person. Though I've never tried writing like light. I think maybe if I said like light or don't go as heavy on the truffle parm or the butter, then maybe they would do that.
I mean, you can just say plain popcorn and you will get it.
Oh, okay.
Because the truffle and the parm are ingredients they add after the fact.
Right. But even the plain one says clarified butter. It goes with it.
That's not plain though.
Yeah, maybe plain. Anyway,
so there is a butter popcorn, but if you write plain, they just give you just the popcorn. They pop it and don't slather.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that next time.
Where were we?
we were negatively reviewing the movie that the world is in love with.
I mean, Steven, that's what I do. All right. 3 favorite songs. Go.
God, I mean, obviously Defying Gravity is number 1 with the bullet.
Yep.
popular. I had fun with. You know, it's jaunty. It's silly. You know, I enjoyed it. Does it have to be singing? Like, I think the musical moment involving the two of them doing hand gestures together at the party is probably like the third best musical moment in the...
I think it's got to be a song.
Okay. I mean, I'm honestly struggling to come up with what the other songs were. Give me some ammo. What are your
funny
favorites?
thing is, I had a third song in my head, but I can't remember the word that everybody's singing. It's the one where they're talking about... Man, this is...
God, people hate us so much right now.
I'm going to say it's What's That Feeling is number 3.
Okay.
But, yeah, I don't know. All in all, this is a film, dare I say it, with forgettable songs, with the exception of Defying Gravity, which is a fucking banger and is a great way to end this film.
Yep, definitely. I guess the last thing I'll say is there's been some internet discourse going around, I think based on what as far as I can tell, is a totally fake look at what the salaries of everyone involved were, that said Ariana Grande made $15 million and Cynthia Erivo made $1 million. As far as I can tell, that just originated from someone saying it on Reddit, so I don't think it's real. But it has led to discourse about how Ariana Grande is huge, and for Cynthia, this is her first big break, and she's mostly a theater person. And as a movie person, I can say Cynthia Erivo has been in a shitload of things, and she is already cool. But I'm happy that she is getting seen by maybe a more mainstream audience who doesn't make it out to the theater as often.
But she's also like by far even in the trailer, if you watch the trailer, it's a lot of Ariana Grande messing around. And you're like, all right, what is this movie? This is like whatever. And then Cynthia Erivo comes on, and then you're like, all right, that's what this movie is. Got it.
Right. She's the lead for sure.
Yeah. So it's just, it's a weird, like, I mean, Ariana Grande is doing well what she's being asked to do, but what she's being asked to do is not that exciting for the film, right?
Yeah.
It's very tongue-in-cheek, look at me, I'm this character, blah, blah, right? And Cynthia Erivo is, like, actually propelling the story forward. So it's just it's a weird comparison, I think.
I agree. It's like there's a lot of characters in TV shows that start out being one-dimensional, and then later the arc is that they deepen, and this is like she is still in the phase of not having deepened at all, which is very far from feeling like a lead performance.
I mean, her arc does deepen, Steven. She goes from being Glinda to being Glinda, so that way a goat can pronounce it. I mean, that's big growth. That's big growth, Steven.
It's very powerful.
That's grande growth.
Okay. One other maybe heretical thing I'm going to say. I love me Jeff Goldblum. Love him as a guy. I love his whole vibe. His whole, like, I don't give a shit, I'm just going to, like, kind of tenuously say the thing and sound like I'm improvising. It doesn't work for me in a movie that cares so little about giving me backstory or a reason to care about someone. Like, to me, him as the wizard is the epitome of my issue with the storytelling in this movie, which is that it feels kind of half-assed. There's a world where I would love him as the wizard, but I think what he is given to do here, where he is the person who gives you all of the narrative, like, exposition of the movie, it doesn't work at all with the Goldblum style. And I don't know, I really didn't think it made sense.
The funny thing is, the second I heard he was cast in the film, knowing nothing about the actual lore of The Wizard of Oz, other than, like, I guess the wizard is a sham, which is the only thing I've absorbed through culture, I was like, oh my God, Jeff Goldblum is perfect casting for the wizard. And when he came on screen, I was like, yep, that's all I needed from him. Great.
So, it's just, should he be a sham so quickly? Don't you want it to be like a turn? I know we've seen, or one of us has seen the original movie, so we already are aware of the shamness, but I think that's what I was missing, is the way he plays the character can only be sham. For, like, he will be disappointing from the moment he starts speaking with them. There's not an instant where I'm like, oh my God, he is so powerful, I as Elphaba would love to work with him, you know? And it makes there, again, not be a turn in her, because it feels like he should be deflating from the moment he starts talking.
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, he's like just such a sham that there's never even a non-sham, which is, I don't know. I think that's part of my problem with watching the film without having the real context for the history, is because it is playing the notes it has to play. So I just take those for granted, and I don't. I'm just like, I know he's a sham. And once he goes from being big head to in person, I'm stopping calculating the shamness of it, because like, oh, that's the reveal, I guess. Because that's what I've absorbed from culture. Big head, just a dude, end of story. So it's like I didn't even think about it, which is the way musicals that ape a real story somewhere else, that's how they do it, right? It's like the story is the thin veneer that the music is sort of played through. Right. And so I feel like I'm grading it both directions for opposite reasons, right? Where I'm like, I was fine with that. It didn't bother me at all. Any last thoughts on this film, Stephen?
I guess there was a part of me that was excited in a world where J.K. Rowling is a TERF, and I'm not that thrilled to watch Harry Potter again. A part of me was excited about the idea of a school where people learn witchcraft. And that is another moment where I was so disappointed that we really don't get to see that happening at all. Like, I struggle in hindsight to remember what the 160 minutes were spent showing me, because it wasn't any of the world building that I was excited about. So I kind of wanted a Harry Potter, redux. I felt like this would have been a great kind of hack to circumvent the fact that I'm probably not going to watch another Harry Potter thing.
There might be more problematic actors they can hire to play new characters in the world.
True. Yeah.
But yeah,
bring Zach Braff back. I think he's got another one in him.
But here's the weird thing about that too, because that also bothered me. Like, I was like, oh, so this is basically like Harry Potter. I don't think any of the schools are about sorcery. As far as I can tell, the only thing is the private tutoring that involves sorcery. Everything else is just regular school.
I feel like there was potions in the montage, but I'm not sure.
I don't even remember. Did I miss the scene where they explained what shiz is?
No, I think that is just part of the color of the world that you're just meant to know that it's shiz. It's the school.
Like it could have been Wiz U or something.
Shiz University. I'm going to guess sight unseen that comes from some Oz thing somewhere, even though I've never heard it. But again, it's the world building sounds like silly words being used once out of every 100 things people say. Like, it feels like not enough. Can I make a prediction that I haven't read because I only skimmed the future? But assuming everyone has to become someone, and it's so dumb I'm predicting this thing that is out that anyone could easily look up. I think the lion cub that they freed, I think I know what's going to happen to him eventually.
Is he going to need bravery or whatever? I don't.
Wow, you really don't know.
Does he need a heart?
The famous line that he stutters, bravery.
Courage.
We have to end this.
Hold on.
The whole podcast.
Tin Man needs a heart.
Yep.
The Scarecrow needs a brain. If I only had a brain.
Yep.
We already said the Cowardly Lion needs courage. I guess that makes sense. C to C.
His song is If I Only Had the Nerve, but courage is what he needs.
What characters are left?
I mean, those are the three who need things other than Dorothy needing to go home.
Yeah, she needs to go home.
Yeah.
Cool. See, I remember stuff. Should we get to verdicts then, Stephen?
Sure.
If you were going to give this a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm going to wait for rental. I think this is it's totally solid as a piece of entertainment. Again, I think I feel so torn about it because you don't get a lot of movies like this where the money is that on screen and a big kind of effusive, bombastic musical. There's a lot to like about it, but man, I just feel like what they did with the storyline, I found it very bewildering as an outsider. And to me, it's just hard to give it a very strong recommendation based on that grounds. Now, there is a heavy caveat within this, which is that if you are a fan of the musical, you will probably love it. My neighbors on both sides were crying multiple times during this movie. People had a wonderful time. They loved it. It gave them everything they were looking for and then some. But as an outsider who wasn't familiar with the source material, I don't know, man. I think I would definitely have done another rev of the script before I called this thing done, because I think it just is asking too much of you in terms of what you have to care about and what you have to let go, and not in the way that a lot of classical musicals require you to suspend your disbelief and just let the songs be the songs. This has just too much runtime and too much dead air for me to be able to do that. And maybe I'm alone. Maybe Christopher and I are alone together. But yeah, that's how I feel. How about you?
Yeah, I am also an outsider here, very much an outsider. And if I ever get to meet the wizard, I will wish him to grant my true heart's desire, which is to be somebody who loves this film. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm going to give it a wait for rental as well. That ending, though, is such a banger. And it's genuinely I kind of love everything about it once they start climbing their way up the thing.
Right.
It's beautiful ending. The crescendos perfectly. It ends where it should, and then plops to be continued. But I think that it was cool to see that with a group of people, that moment of it. But the rest of it kind of left me wanting. And I'm curious to see what it does next. I hope it does go darker. I hope there's enough there to explain all the crap that it didn't explain to me in this first one. And I hope that it feels like one more complete work once we get to where we are. And I hope it has any song remotely as good as Defying Gravity.
I bet they're just going to find a way to reprise Defying Gravity.
Yeah. I will say the worst part about the trailer we watched was it's cover of its own song in a way that makes it way less epic. But whatever. But yeah, that is the end of our review of Wicked. Maybe the end of construction. But Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Christopher IRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at SpoilerWarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. And if you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. Steven and I are going to take off right now because we need a breather, and then we need to sit down and record separately a review of Gladiator 2. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
So they are about to replace the heater downstairs.
Great. Okay. I heard that one.